Aloha. My name is Rosianna Nani Azman, or Dr. Nani, to my students and to many in the Star Trek multiverse. I teach for the University of Hawaii. I am a full professor of psychology at Maui College, but for the last 5 years, I also teach a Psychology of Star Trek class for Manoa, the flagship campus of the university. For me, Star Trek is more of a life philosophy than it is a science fiction franchise. I've learned how to be a woman in science and in leadership, thanks to Captain Janeway. I've learned to make sure I'm included as a woman of color, thanks to Lieutenant Uhura. I've learned how to be a boss, or a department chair in my line of work, thanks to Captain Picard. I teach my kid and my students to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, and most importantly, to be kind and honorable, all of which I learned from watching and reading Star Trek. I want to believe that we as a species will be able to move beyond the hatred and fear of those who are not quite like we are and embrace different cultures and different belief systems. I started watching Star Trek, the original series, in reruns with my dad when I was a young child, still in single digits. He's a fan of William Shatner. I never used to see my father watching TV, so be able to join him seemed like a special treat. Some of the episodes used to scare me, and I'm sure I missed a lot of nuances at that age, but it was a bonding moment with my dad. I soon realized that the animated series was on Saturday mornings. Yes, I'm old enough to remember when cartoons were only on Saturday mornings. I recognized the characters, so with 3 siblings, I used to wake up super early to make sure I had control of the TV so that I could watch my show. When high school rolled around, The Next Generation came out, and I was officially a Star Trek fan. As a graduate student working on my PhD, I was teaching intro psychology at Kapi'olani Community College in Honolulu. I had set aside roughly 2 class periods for each chapter, but I remember making it through the social psychology chapter almost completely in one lesson. I had an extra class period, so I decided to show them TNG's The Outcast, Season 5, Episode 17. After the episode, I told the students to look at their notes, and they had to find 3 terms that we had just covered in the chapter, and to explain to me how each term was exemplified in the episode, in writing. The students did phenomenally well. Back then, it was a wonderful commentary on how we treated the LGBTQ+ community. 30 years later, it still is. The next semester, I was interviewing for a teaching position at a small college in Northern California for after I finished my doctorate. One of the interviewers asked me if I could teach any class, what would it be? I was told it was okay to be creative. On the fly, I came up with the psychology of Star Trek. Someone on the search committee had apparently seen the original series because he said, because emotions are illogical? I said, actually, I was thinking more about how identifying concepts exemplified in the episodes improves critical thinking and how we can discuss psychology concepts from different fields as well as discuss larger societal implications. My main campus at UH is mostly a 2-year campus. In 2018, I realized that for the first time ever, I was going to have a decent-sized cohort of students graduating with their bachelors from UH at the same time, for whom I was their original psychology professor. I had never really been able to see a student all the way from freshman to senior year before. These were some of my best students ever, still to this day, and I wanted the chance to teach them one more time. Thankfully, I was already working with the faculty at Manoa, the flagship campus in Honolulu, on another project, and I asked if it would be okay for me to teach a 400-level advanced topics course. At the time, they really only let full-time faculty from their campus teach these courses, but thankfully, I still had friends there, some back from when I was a graduate student, who went to bat for me. It took some hoop jumping, but I was approved to teach my Psychology of Star Trek class in spring 2019, which meant that I had the opportunity to teach some of these students one more time before they graduated. My friend and colleague, Liana, who I've known since I was 11, was intrigued by the idea of my class, as was her then middle school daughter. They wanted to watch the episodes, sit in on my class, and join the discussions. It was probably because Star Trek was a bonding moment for my father and me, but I agreed. Just before the spring semester started, I got a text from Liana asking if I wanted her husband, Peter, to ask Eugene Roddenberry Jr. to see if he would be a guest speaker in my class. Peter knows Eugene through work and knows he likes to come to Maui often. I don't think I ever said yes faster in my life. Ever since then, whenever I teach the class, I have the best guest speaker ever. After that first year, John Champion, one of the co-hosts of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, would join the class a couple of times in the semester as well for his favorite episodes. This past spring when John showed up, he had a lot of fun. He had never seen me with a completely full class, over 20 students before. Now, I didn't count, but I think John showed up for close to half of my classes. I was able to get Norman Lau, the other Mission Log host, to show up at the end of last semester too. The students absolutely love it when Eugene, John, and Norm show up. Most of the students aren't fans of Star Trek when they start, but many are fans by the end of the semester. I was even able to talk my RPGs, Roddenberry podcast guys, yes, I know it means something else in tabletop games, into doing a special class with my Lahaina Luna students last May. For anyone who may not remember, on August 8th, 2023, much of Lahaina, Maui, my hometown, burned to the ground. Classes at the high school were a sense of normalcy for these students. I was so proud of them for making it through 2 semesters with me after what they endured that I wanted to do something special for them. I had them watch TNG's Half a Life after we finished the developmental psychology chapter on late adulthood. And then my 3 RPGs joined us via Zoom, who in true local island culture I introduced as Uncle Rod, Uncle John, and Uncle Norm. The guys and the students had a blast. This past spring, when Mission Log Live came back to discuss the final season of Discovery, I decided that as a sort of thank you to John for coming to so many of my classes, I should call in to Mission Log Live. After all, he was supporting me with my work, so I decided to support him with his. I was introduced as Dr. Nunny, and I had a ton of fun, which I honestly didn't expect. Up until then, I'd listened to or watched the podcast, but I'd never called in. I showed up almost every week and did a mini Psychology of Star Trek segment on the latest episode. I had made some friends through calling into the show, and now some of them show up to my class to help us dissect the episodes. Just earlier this month, Dr. Jennifer Griswold and I presented at Comic-Con Honolulu. We had 2 back-to-back panels, Teaching with Trek and Learning with Trek. I talked about Psychology of Star Trek, and Dr. Griswold, as an atmospheric scientist, discussed the class she's creating, climate change and the final frontier. We had roughly 20 people for each session, and I had some of my friends and former students, in person or in Zoom, as I ran a class and we discussed The Measure of a Man. I let the audience join in too. When I saw the Roddenberry Foundation post about the Roddenberry Ambassador position, it caught my attention. I've been teaching for over 20 years. I already spend my days making multimedia presentations and talking about Star Trek. I'm a public speaker, and I use many tools to engage my students. Mostly because not everyone learns in the same way, so I try to meet my students where they are so I can be the most helpful. I learn new technology almost every year to be able to do this. To me, it's a natural progression to help share and explain the Roddenberry Foundation initiatives and what the Roddenberry Fellows are doing. I know my social media following is probably smaller than others. It was only this past May when I decided to create public social media accounts. I've always been a private person, but between Mission Log Live and wanting a way to stay connected to my students as they graduate, I created the public accounts. I post about psychology, Star Trek, unions, piano, and cats. I also run the social media pages for our faculty union, the University of Hawaii Professional Assembly. We're a smaller union, but we have recently affiliated with a larger national union, the AFT. Since the AFT Biennial Convention in July, I've managed to increase the traffic on the UHPA social media pages by, at times, over 1,000%. As a small union, we don't currently have a staff member to run these social media pages, so I just started helping out. As our union is trying to raise our profile in our communities and do more outreach, I've been continuing on my Star Trek-esque journey to do good work and be kind. And I get to do that for people who aren't even my students now. I do, however, have an online presence. I remember Googling to see if anyone had adapted our Dr. Seuss-inspired anti-plagiarism PowerPoint for middle school or high school, and I was pleasantly surprised to see my university, my union, and Star Trek come up. I am proud for this to be my legacy. My strength, in addition to literally doing presentations with varying technology several times a week in different classes or in different aspects of my work, is psychology. I observe, I learn, and try to understand my audience, and I know how to change my presentation, sometimes on the spot, using psychology to best reach the people in the way that will be the most impactful. I can do that for the Roddenberry Foundation too, if you just give me the chance. Mahalo.